Straight talk from Israel. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
Hello, and welcome to News from the Torah. Today is the 19th day of Tevet, December 3rd, 2021, Torah portion of Shmot, Exodus. And I'm Leah Aharoni. As we start a new book of the Torah, the book of Shmot, the book of Exodus, I would like to invite you to this brand new radio show, a brand new radio show that will take you on an Exodus as well. An Exodus from superficial news and to the real internal meaning. Every morning we wake up and we open the media. We open the internet, we open the radio or TV, and some of us, yes, we still open the newspaper. Or maybe we open our Facebook feed, wherever you get your news. And in there, we seem to get the real world. We find out what Trump had to say today, or what Netanyahu had to do today, what's happening with COVID in Germany, and how is the vaccine going in Israel. And that seems to be the real story, the real news. That seems to tell us something about our world. But just think, go 500 years forward. Will anybody remember any of this? Will anybody remember Benjamin Netanyahu? Will anybody remember Donald Trump? Will anybody remember Biden? I don't think so. I think those names will mean nothing 500 years from now. But as our posterity looks back at us, they'll remember the trends of our time. They will remember the ideologies of our time. And yes, they will remember the meaning that we made with the news. So this is the Exodus I propose that you join me on. The Exodus into the deeper meaning. How can we make out that meaning? And for that, friends, I have a secret and unexpected tool, the weekly Torah portion. Yes, the weekly Torah portion that we read in the synagogue every Saturday morning, and the weekly Torah portion that we study throughout the week leading to that Saturday morning has in it all the information that we need to know what is relevant today. Yes, I know that it sounds crazy. I know that it sounds crazy that a 3,000-year-old book would have specific information for us today. Well, stay tuned and you'll find all about it right after the break.
How did a nice Jewish girl from Delaware end up living in Israel? Shalom, I'm Natalie Sapinski. Join me on my show, Returning Home. Meet different people who have moved to Israel. Hear their personal stories, their highs, their lows, and everything in between. Each week, we talk to experts on immigration and the process of moving to Israel. Listen to Returning Home every Thursday, only on Israel News Talk Radio.
And we are back. This is Leah Aharoni with News from the Torah. So this is our first show, and I would like to tell you a little bit about myself. Who is this Leah, and what brings her to the radio? And why should you be listening to me? So I will start with a story, because a story is always the best way to get anything known. And my story goes back about 2 years ago. One day, I had a really, really, really bad day. It was so bad that I left my whole agenda and decided that I'm going to go to the Kotel, the Western Wall. It's a place I love and I spend a lot of time there. And I will go to the Western Wall, and not just the wall itself, I will go to the Western Wall tunnels. It's a place right off the Western Wall. And if you walk through the tunnels, if you've ever been there, you reach a place that's just opposite the Holy of Holies. It's the holiest place in the world. It's the closest we can get to the Holy of Holies of the temple. And it's a spot where only women can pray. And it's my favorite place to be in the whole world. So I had a really bad day, and I decided to go there and just cry and pray. And when I got there, I looked at the bookshelf and I saw the book of Psalms, Tehillim. And I decided to read the whole book of Psalms. People do it sometimes. It's a 2.5-hour undertaking. And I've never done that before. It just looked like too much. But that day, it was that bad. I decided I'm going to sit down and read the whole book. So I'm sitting there and I'm reading through the Psalms. I'm crying and reading and crying and reading and crying. And at a certain point, a light bulb goes off right over my head. And I have this crazy idea that I'm going to travel to Ukraine. Ukraine? What is there to do in Ukraine? How is Ukraine related to this? So if you don't know, Ukraine is the birthplace, it's the cradle of the Hasidic movement. The Hasidic movement was started about 300 years ago, and it's all about how God operates in this physical world. It's all about how everything in the physical world hides God's presence and uncovering God's presence in the physical world. So a lot of people go to Ukraine to visit the resting places of the different masters of the Hasidic movement, the different rabbis who manifested and wrote this Torah in their books. So I've heard a lot about other people traveling to these places to visit them, but I never thought of doing that myself. I never connected to going outside of the land of Israel, going outside of the Holy Land for a holiness experience. But that moment was just so clear, and I knew it with such clarity that this is what I need to do, that, I was just going. I knew I was going. So I came back home, and I looked at the different trips that are available, different teachers that lead such trips, and I didn't connect to any of them. And then I had a conversation with a friend of mine who leads trips like this on her own, and I said, how about we put together a trip? That's me, I teach this Torah. I give classes on the Hasidic movement, on the Hasidic Torah. And my friend leads these trips. So we decided to do a trip together. Sure enough, we got a group of women who wanted to join us. And we booked the tickets. And the very next day, my friend calls me and tells me, Leah, I can't go. I said, why not? She says, because I just got a call from the school and my daughter's graduation party is the same day we have to go. So I can't go. So I said, so what am I going to do? She says, you will take these women on your own. And I told her, yes, but I haven't been to these places. I know all about the rabbis. I know all about the teachings, but I haven't been to this part of Ukraine. She says, I'm sorry, you'll just have to go. So sure enough, we did. We did go to Ukraine. I created a whole different itinerary, and I researched to death and spoke to a lot of people and got the logistics down pat. And we had an amazing trip. And I've been doing these trips for the past 2.5 years. And what I discovered was something really, really interesting. You see, I was born in the former Soviet Union, at the height of the communist regime. And from a very, very young age, I learned that there is this story that is told, and then there's the real inside story. So yes, there was the story on the news, there was the ideology that was spewed out, but then there was a real truth that was totally behind that and was totally unseen. And from a very early age, I learned that there are two levels of existence, two levels of experience. There is the experience as we see it, sort of the physical reality, but there's always something hiding under the surface. And no, I'm not talking about conspiracy theories. I'm not going to go there. But there's always some kind of meaning, some kind of trend, some kind of process going on underneath the surface. And that's something I feel very strongly, and that's something that informs everything that I do. And since my trip to Ukraine, I've been teaching more and more of this Torah, and I've been talking about the inside meaning of things more and more, and how we can discover this inside meaning by learning Torah, and specifically the teachings of the Hasidic masters. So a little bit more about me and my journey from Soviet Russia to Israel. My family was very much connected to the inside meaning. My family did not buy into the communist story. And every night I would go to sleep with a transistor. I don't even know if you know what a transistor is. It's a small portable radio, and my father would use it to catch the voices. The voices, yes. The Voice of America, the Voice of Israel, BBC in Russian, all the radio stations you were not allowed to hear in Russian. It was a criminal offense to listen to these radio stations, but every night my father would turn on the transistor and put it near my bed, and I would fall asleep listening to the Voice of Israel, the Voice of America, and BBC in Russian. They told a story that was a little bit more real than the one I heard on the news. So very early on, I discovered that there were two stories going on at the same time, or rather, two sides of the same story going on at the same time. A little bit before I was 12, the Soviet Union opened up with perestroika and glasnost. Those of you who are a little bit older will remember that. A group of American Jews decided to print Jewish books in Russian and bring them into Russia for the first time legally. And sure enough, I was lucky to get a set of these books. I got a Chumash, the Torah, and a Siddur, a prayer book. Hebrew books translated into Old Church Russian. Yes, there wasn't even time to translate them into proper Russian that is spoken in the 20th century. But those were the books I got, and I could read and understand Old Church Russian. And that opened a whole world of Jewish experience and Jewish learning for me that I didn't know about it previously. My family had all kinds of vestiges of Jewish practice left, but we didn't really know a lot about the Torah or about Jewish law or about Jewish prayer. And those books were my first taste of Judaism. Shortly afterwards, my family left Russia. Shortly after that, I walked into the New York Public Library, walked over to the Judaism section, and devoured the entire thing. I taught myself how to read Hebrew. And then one day I decided I really needed a proper Jewish education. So I opened the Yellow Pages, the best place to find the right school, found one school, got on the bus, came to the school, knocked on the principal's door and said, "Hello, I'd like to study here." And the principal looked at me and said, "Where did you come from? And where is your mother?" And I said, "My mother has nothing to do with this. I want a Jewish education." So sure enough, I came back with my mother, and the principal took me into the school. And that was the beginning of my formal Jewish education in 10th grade. I learned Hebrew. Well, I flunked Hebrew in high school. I learned Torah. I learned about Jewish law. By the time I finished 12th grade, I knew enough to come to Israel and go to seminary. So that was the beginning of a deep, deep dive into Jewish learning, into Torah learning. A deep dive that hasn't stopped in the past 30 years. I love learning Torah. I feel like it's my lifeline, and I can't imagine living life without being enlightened by the Torah. I was 17 when I came to Israel, all alone. I met my future husband, and since then we have had 7 kids. I live in one of the satellite communities of Jerusalem. And when I was about 25, I started my first business. First, translating. But later on, after running a business for about 15 years, I decided, okay, let's learn the inside story of business. And that was when I went and got a master's degree in organizational psychology. I learned about coaching and business consulting. And for the past 7 years, I've been helping other women set up and expand their businesses by playing the inside story of expanding their own psychology and expanding their own ability and motivation. So this is me. This is Leah in a nutshell. And after we come back from this break, we're going to talk about the real thing. And the real thing is, how can the Torah inform our everyday life? How can we look to the Torah to better understand the news? How can a 3,000-year-old book, and I mean, yes, we all know If you believe that the Torah is God's law and it's God's wisdom, so of course it's relevant. How can the Torah help us understand the news around us, the world around us, the confusing times we're living in? So all of that right after the break. Stay tuned.
Shalom, everybody. Making a difference often takes just one moment and one person at a time. I am Orly Benny Davis, your show host on Israel News Talk Radios from Jerusalem with love. You'll be hearing people talking about politics, religion, social issues, and making a better tomorrow. Join me, Orly Benny Davis, for God and Country. From Jerusalem with love.
Wednesdays on Israel News Talk Radio.
Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Did you know this psalm and many others were composed by a Jewish shepherd and musician who later became a king? Would you like to know some of the inner meanings of psalms to help you connect with God and strengthen your soul? An exciting and easy-to-read book is now available which will help you do just that. Software for the Soul, Psalms for Everyone, available on Kindle, Audible, and Amazon.com. Software for the Soul.
Welcome back. This is Leah Aharoni. And before we left for the break, we asked, how can the Torah, how can this 3,000-year-old book educate us about what's happening today in 2021? How can we understand today's news through the prism of the Torah? And why is it specifically that the weekly Torah portion that is relevant for understanding the news around us? So I think you've noticed I like stories, so I'm going to tell a story. The Baal Shem Tov was the founder of the Hasidic movement. He lived during the 17th century. He started explaining how it is that God is present in everything in the physical world and how we can uncover God in the physical world. So the Baal Shem Tov had a group of students, and among those students were the Kaminka brothers. There were two rabbis who were learning with the Baal Shem Tov, but they also needed to provide for their family, and they asked the Baal Shem Tov what's the best business they could go into to make money. And the Baal Shem Tov told them, you're important people, and your time is important. So if you want to make money, you should be selling big things, because selling big things brings a lot of money. While if you sell small things, you're going to make small money. And you should really be selling big things. So he told them to buy and sell oxen. Yes, like cows. Oxen were the tractors of the 17th and 18th century. So he told them to get into the oxen business. And to do that, they had to go to a fair fairly far away from their home and buy some oxen and then take them to a different fair and sell them there. And the Baal Shem Tov would give them precise guidelines, what kind of oxen to buy, how many oxen to buy, and then how to take these oxen from one fair to a different fair without getting lost in the woods, without getting attacked by the robbers, and without the oxen getting, too worn off by this road. I know this sounds really funny. Why is this holy rabbi dealing with oxen? But we'll see in a minute. So sure enough, the Kaminka brothers would go to a fair and buy some oxen, exactly following the Baal Shem Tov's guidelines. And then they would take the oxen to a different fair, sell them there for profit, and then have the money to study the Torah and to be learning with the Baal Shem Tov while their families could live properly. This one time, the Kaminka brothers didn't have the time to go and get the blessing from the Baal Shem Tov. So they went to the fair without talking to him first. And they bought the oxen. And then they were taking these oxen from one fair to a different fair. And while they were in the woods, they tied the oxen to a tree and then went to sleep. They wake up in the morning, and lo and behold, there are no oxen anywhere to be seen. And they were sure that the oxen got stolen by the robbers. So they sent one of the brothers to the Baal Shem Tov to ask him to pray and find the oxen. And when the brother arrived, the Baal Shem Tov was sitting in his study and learning the Zohar, the holy book of Kabbalah. And this brother told the Baal Shem Tov the story of the oxen that disappeared. The Baal Shem Tov said, okay, next time you come to me first. But wait a minute. The Baal Shem Tov looked and focused on his page of the Zohar that was in front of him. And then he looked back up at one of the brothers and said, okay, your oxen weren't stolen. They're right there where you left them. You're just not noticing them. Go to this and this specific place. And he gave him some signs, and you will find the oxen. So the brother looked at the Baal Shem Tov and said, please tell me, teacher, are my oxen hidden in the Zohar? You looked at the page. What do the oxen and this page have to do one with the other? How can you see my oxen in the book? And the Baal Shem Tov looked at him, not understanding. And he said, don't you know? It says in the Torah that when God created the world, he created this light that shone from one end of the world to the other end of the world, from the beginning of the world to the end of the world. And this light is always consciousness. Light is always wisdom. So this wisdom of everything that ever happened and everything that will happen was part of God's creation. But then God said, wait, it's too dangerous to leave this light accessible to anybody because it can be misused by people with bad intentions. So God decided to hide this light. And this light is hidden for the holy people inside the Torah. So the Baal Shem Tov said, when you came, I was studying the book of the Zohar. That was the book that was in front of me. Maybe another time I would have a different book in front of me. It doesn't matter what's the book. The light of the Torah, the light of the world, everything that will happen, everything that ever happened, the light that shines from one end of the world to the other end of the world is all hidden in the Torah for tzaddikim, for holy people who are connected to the Torah, who are completely egoless, and they're completely connected to God, and they can access this light and know all that is happening and use it for good. So sure enough, the Kaminka brother came back to the forest. They found the oxen, and they, lived happily ever after. But I think the really important lesson is not for them. The really important lesson is for us. That yes, everything, all the knowledge, all the consciousness, everything that has been and everything that ever will be is hidden in the Torah. But here's our problem. I'm not a Kabbalist. You're not a Kabbalist. And none of us, or maybe very, very few of us, can look on a page of text, any text really, any Torah text, and see this light, and see this wisdom, and see this understanding, and see what's going on. So where does that leave us? And how can we access this light? How can we understand what's really going on? So no, I have no pretenses, and nobody will be able to find their lost car, by looking on a page after listening to this radio show. I certainly cannot do that. But here's the thing. God's wisdom and intelligence is not only hidden in the Torah. It is hidden in time. And to understand what we're going to do on this show every week, we need to understand how time works in Torah. And it's very different how time is understood by the Western world. By the Western world, time is just time. It's another piece of time that just happened. So you can think of it as numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, and so on. And from time to time, we have a holiday, and that helps us mark time. Judaism understands time very differently. Judaism understands time as energy. How is time energy? Judaism understands time as a unit of energy that you need to perform a specific task or to get to a specific outcome. So, for example, when a Jew wakes up in the morning and wants to pray the morning prayer, he or she can only pray the morning prayer for the first 4 hours. After 4 hours are gone, the opportunity to pray the morning prayer is gone. The first 4 hours of the day are the energy for the morning prayer, and with the morning prayer for accessing the wisdom and the consciousness we need for this day. After first 4 hours of the day, that consciousness dissipates and you cannot access it, so you cannot pray the morning prayer. And this goes on and on. There are many, many examples of that. So to better understand it with an analogy, I would like you to think how somebody would bake a cake. When you bake a cake, you have to make the batter. You turn on the oven for, let's say, 40 minutes, right? So those 40 minutes is when the oven is on and it's hot and it can bake a cake. There's a certain unit of energy in the oven for a certain period of time that creates a certain outcome. So this is how we Jews think of time. Every unit of time has the energy to create a certain outcome. But then there is more to that. When you think about holidays, why do we celebrate certain holidays? We usually think of it as a historic event. So for example, we think that Passover is a holiday that we celebrate because 3,000 years ago, Jews left Egypt. But nothing could be further from truth. Because, those Jews are out of Egypt for a long time. What does that have to do with me here in 2021 in Israel? In reality, that same energy of Exodus that took place during Passover in Egypt, that same energy of Exodus is accessible for me every single Passover, every single year. And I can access it to leave my own Egypt. Or for example, the holiday of Shavuot, the holiday when we celebrate the giving of the Torah. We don't celebrate Shavuot today because 3,000 years ago, on this day, God gave the Torah to the Jewish people. No. We celebrate the Torah because on this day, this year, God is giving us the Torah at a certain way that's very different from anything we have known until now. So if you understand these two concepts, we can now start to understand that every week has an energy of its own that can take us to a destination of its own. And every single week has an energy that is hidden in the Torah portion. If we take these two concepts together and we explore them, we can start to understand how the Torah can educate us about the news.
You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
This is Shai Ben-Tekoa, and each week I'll be webcasting to you from Judea, origin of the word Jew, a people besieged and beleaguered in every generation. Nazi Germany's but a memory, but in its place the world invented the phantom Palestinians as this generation's internationally authorized Jew killers. Tune in for a different slant on life in Israel, Phantom Nation, every Monday.
Hi, I'm Rabbi David Aaron. The soul basics are the most profound, the most essential, and yet often the most neglected in our education. Join me for Soul Talk on Israel's News Talk Radio and discover the secrets to love, spiritual growth, and personal power.
Welcome back. This is Leah, and I would like to take this week's Torah portion, the Torah portion of Shmot, the first Torah portion in the book of Exodus, and actually show you how everything we've discussed up until now, how God hides himself in the story and how the physical world hides God from us, we can see that exactly in our own Torah portion. So this Torah portion starts with a really interesting story. And the Torah tells us that there was a new Pharaoh who didn't know Joseph. So all of the commentators on the Torah ask, how could this be? How could a Pharaoh not know about Joseph? Just for a short recap from the previous chapters in Genesis, in Breshit, Joseph was the viceroy of Egypt. And when Egypt was faced with a famine, Joseph became the viceroy, and he literally saved Egypt from famine. He ran the Egyptian economy, and nothing in Egypt moved without Joseph's permission. So it's impossible that the Pharaoh would not know about Joseph. What is the Torah really telling us? So who was Joseph? Joseph was a person who dreamt. He was a dreamer. And not only that, he was a person who could interpret dreams. He could see a dream, a picture, and see behind the dream, see through the dream, and to understand what's the message this dream is sending. He was the person who could see the story behind the story. Joseph was also the man who was sold by his own brothers, his own flesh and blood, to Egypt. And after he became the viceroy, the brothers came to him, not knowing that he was Joseph, because they were starving. There was a famine. And Joseph tested the brothers until they repented selling him. But when he revealed himself to the brothers, he said, "It wasn't you who sold me. It was God who sent me to Egypt, so I have to provide for you." So Joseph was the man who could see the real story, the story behind the story, the inside message in his own life. And Pharaoh? Yes, Pharaoh forgot about Joseph. Pharaoh didn't know about this Joseph. Pharaoh didn't know about this quality of looking through the physical reality and finding God's meaning in it. Actually, the very opposite. What Pharaoh wanted to do was to get the Jews enslaved so that the Jews would forget about who they are and what they were supposed to do in the world. Not only did Pharaoh not see God in the world, he actually wanted to hide God. He wanted to make sure the Jews would not rebel by being themselves. And he created an alternate reality. He enslaved Jews through hard labor and created this illusion that their life was all about building the pyramids. The real slavery wasn't just that Jews had to do the back-breaking labor of building the pyramids. The real slavery of Egypt was that their mind and their mindfulness and their consciousness and their awareness was in exile. They had no access to their own mind, to their own thinking, to their consciousness and worldview. They couldn't look through the physical reality and perceive the inside message because they were so busy building Pharaoh's pyramids. And that was Pharaoh's scheme. And this is the Exodus that I would like to invite you to join. If you read the first few chapters of Exodus, you will notice the word "to know" many, many times. Pharaoh didn't know about Joseph, and then God didn't know about the Jews' suffering. And then he remembered about Jews' suffering, and he told Moses that I know that the Jews are in pain. And then throughout the plagues of Egypt, the word "to know" repeats itself again and again, because the point of the plagues was that people would know God. So what does it mean to know God? And what was the point of the slavery? And what was the point of the plagues? To know God means to understand that God is the lifeblood, the life source of everything, that God is present in everything, in every person, in every event, in every thing, object, experience that we're going through, that God is everywhere, but He's hiding. There's a great Hasidic story about a rabbi who was walking around his neighborhood and saw a little boy crying. So he asked the boy, "Why are you crying?" And he said, "I was playing hide and seek with my friends, and I hid so well that they didn't find me. But then, when they didn't find me, they gave up. And nobody's looking for me now. And here, I'm stuck hidden, and nobody's looking for me." And the rabbi said, "You know what? This is exactly how God feels. He's hiding inside reality in order for us to find Him, in order for us to connect to Him. But we just forget that He's hiding, and we don't go looking for Him." Yes, He has hidden Himself really well. So what would your life look like if you knew that every person and every experience that come across your path are really God hiding Himself? How would you approach the people of your life if you knew that God was inside of them? How would you approach the experiences of your life, the sweet ones and the not so sweet ones, if you knew that God was inside them? And we are right in the middle of a plague. We've been in this plague for almost a year. And even before the plague, even before COVID, we've reached this reality when there are two competing narratives about the world that are running parallel to each other. There is the right narrative, there is the left narrative, and we can't really hear each other, and we cannot understand each other, and we don't understand ourselves. I think if COVID did anything, it sort of unraveled everything we know about the world, about ourselves, about science, about government, about how we'll live our life. And God is hiding inside of this plague, just like He did in Egypt, and telling us, "Knock, knock. Hello, I'm inside here. You forgot to look for me. Look up. There is something else going on. It's not the things you've been busy with." Now, for all of us that have been spending our life running to our job in the morning, and running back home in the evening, and going to social events, and going to cultural events, and just life as we know it, came COVID, and everything unraveled in just a matter of days. And we ended up in a totally new reality, and we've been living in this alternate reality for the past year. And all it is God knocking our door and saying, maybe you should look elsewhere. Maybe it's time to leave this Egypt, to leave this reality that this Pharaoh has created for us. And this Pharaoh is really us, ourselves, keeping ourselves busy because we have forgotten that there's God in everything, and He is the one who keeps us going. So I know what some of you are thinking. If God is in everything, and God is behind everything, and if every person and event in my life is just an appearance of God, where does that leave me? And what's my job? What, am I going to wake up and sit on the couch the whole day? I'm not going to go to work because everything is from God? So no. In the Torah, that's not the way. In the Torah, our job is to engage with the world, to live the world, to have the relationships, to have the experiences, to wake up every morning and go to work, and go to those cultural events, and go to those social events, but then to understand that I'm going through the motions of the physical world, but I'm really looking to find and see God in every situation, in every experience. And it's having this presence of God accompany us, or actually us accompany it. That's the point of Torah living. And it's hard to do when you're busy. It's hard to do when you're enslaved to all kinds of other values, when you're enslaved to money, when you're enslaved to honor, when you're enslaved to whatever mentality is present in your community, to whatever values are the most important in your community. And we forget to connect to God, who is really inside us and inside all of us. So whatever you think of COVID and whatever you think of this plague, it has been a crisis. And it is such a shame to let a crisis go to waste. So it is my blessing to all of us that we don't let this crisis go to waste, and that we take this opportunity to notice God in everything that is happening in our life. And with this blessing, I say thank you very much for listening. Thank you for joining me today with news from the Torah. And I hope to see you again here on Israel News Talk Radio next week.
Israel News Talk Radio's chat room. Just click the orange button at the top of the IsraelNewsTalkRadio.home page, log in as yourself or an anonymous guest, and join in on the fun. You'll meet other listeners from all over the world who listen to Israel News Talk Radio, and you can make new friends. Israel News Talk Radio's chat room. It's the closest you can get to being in the studio with us.
We love listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
Where can you get the inside news on Israel? At Israel News Talk Radio, we're dedicated to sharing Israel's inside story with the world by providing our listeners with news on Israeli politics, current affairs, and Israeli Jewish culture. The Israel News Talk Radio homepage also provides you, the listener, with useful information at your fingertips, with scrolling news headlines, weather, currency exchange, Shabbat candlelighting times, and so much more. Our radio programming is always accessible and on demand. We operate absolutely free of charge for everyone, everywhere. If you love what we do, partner with us now by becoming an Israel News Talk Radio supporter. With your support, you'll be inscribed on our Israel News Talk Radio Wall of Fame. There's nothing like us in the world. Be part of something great. Israel News Talk Radio. Straight talk from Israel.
If you love Israel News Talk Radio, then you'll love our Facebook page. We keep you up to date on what's happening in Israel, plus little surprise treasures that we don't share on the radio. Go now to follow us on Facebook. Just look for the Israel News Talk Radio Facebook page, and don't forget to subscribe and follow us by clicking on the like button. We post great stuff there that you'll want to share. Israel News Talk Radio on Facebook and Israel News Radio on Twitter.
News, opinion, and more. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.